Hello, Monday World News as well. Start with the New York Times Sunday Review and a David Leonhardt article where he writes, "There's no shortage of explanations for the economy's maddening inability to leave behind the Great Recession and start adding large numbers of jobs. The deficit is too big, the stimulus was flawed, China is overtaking us, business is over-regulated, Wall Street is under-regulated. But the real culprit, or at least the main one, has been hiding in plain sight. We are living through a tremendous bust. It isn't simply a housing bust. It isn't simply a housing bust, no, it's a fizzling of the great consumer bubble that was decades in the making." Gracious. July the 16th, 2011. It's the fizzling of the great consumer bubble that was decades in the making. Keep up to date, read the Sunday Review, New York Times. Still, we get a good chart, this one. 1B. Now, these are red things pointing downwards are when the consumer of the United States starts going below zero, as in reducing the amount of spending they were doing the year before. Reducing their spending. And it goes back to 1960 recession, where it went down about 1% for a while, the 71 recession, and then the 73-75 recession, that was oil, wasn't it? And then the 80-81, that was oil-ish as well. And then Volcker comes in with his high interest rates and things. Then the 91 recession, that was the first Iraq War. The first Iraq War? Yep, sounds right. And 2001, the tech crash. But none of these are going down less than 3%. And that tech crash was longer, as we know, from the Joker chart than any of the others, and spending went down to a maximum of minus 2.4% for a whole 30 months before it got back up. Well, we're 45 months into this one and still down at minus 6.9. So David Leonhardt's big spot there, really, that's been hiding in plain sight from the people at the New York Times. And this chart kind of explains it, really. This is household debt and personal savings. Now, which do you imagine is which? Yep, household debt percentage of GDP going from just over 60% to just over 103%, and that's before the crash, because that only goes up to 2007, with savings coming down from personal savings rate of 12% in 1982 down to bugger all. And of course it's going back up, personal saving rates going back up, and the household debt to GDP is coming down because it had to. Right, linked with this are the number of new foreclosures. They used to be kicking in at about 500,000 a year, and it reached 2 million a year, 1.5 million households having to play with foreclosures. And that was from an article, a paper, written for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York by Raven Malloy and Hui San. And the abstract of that paper is, despite the recent flood of foreclosures on residential mortgages, little is known about what happens to borrowers and their households after their mortgage has been foreclosed. We study the post-foreclosure experience of US households using a unique data set based on the credit reports of large panel of individuals from 1999 to 2010. Although foreclosures considerably raises the probability of moving, I think it would, wouldn't it? Don't understand that. The majority of post-foreclosure migrants do not end up in substantially less desirable neighbourhoods or more crowded living conditions. These results suggest that, on average, foreclosure does not impose an economic burden large enough to severely reduce housing consumption. It's all right then. But at least they're trying to get some background information, not just the front ground figures. Well done, the New York Fed. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, let's have a look at tax take to see if that's where people's money is having to go to pay for all this budget deficit. Well, it wouldn't go to the budget deficit, go to the government to spend, and it seems that it's not. Income tax rates, this is the top bracket. As you can see, this goes all the way back to the First World War, and most of the time it's been a lot higher than it is now. It is now at 35%. But if we track back from that, it's been a bit lower, but generally it's stepped down from the 1960s all the way down to where it is now. That's the top bracket. And these are the other brackets. Under 8,500, well, we don't count that. 8,500 to 34,500, poorer paid working class people, 15% tax, not much. 34,000 to 84,000, the bulk of the middle class is in there at paying 25% tax. So we know social taxes go on the top of that, but that's not much tax to be paying. So the money isn't going in taxes. It's psychological, and this is what a lot of these Fed charts and all this kind of leave behind, that there are real people out there with real psychology, and they've been herded up to this borrowing because everything's going to be wonderful. But people are generally not greedy, they are generally fearful, and it doesn't take much to tip them into fear, and that's where they are, and I think that's where they're going to stay. So these ideas of US and UK governments thinking that their populations are going to be taking on more debt, I don't think that is going to be fulfilled. And if they need more debt to be taken on for the GDP to grow, for instance, then the government are going to have to do it themselves. On behalf of the people, of course. See you tomorrow. Bye.